Archives of Prasar Bharati presents the timeless treasure of golden era.
When we did Jawanbandi in the Star Theatre on the 4th January, P.C. Joshi, the then General Secretary of the Communist Party of India, had come there to see that show. He liked it very much. And he said that there should be a Hindi translation and be taken over to Bombay.
Antima
Vilasha. So that way a translation was made. A new batch of actors were there. Bijan was working in the Anand Bazar Patrika. He couldn't go. So I had to take his role, the patriarch. And we rehearsed and went to Bombay.
Khaja Ahmed Abbas wrote about this play. And
in the last page of Bombay Chronicle.
And yes. Where he called you a genius of a director.
Yeah, and Prithviraj Kapoor was also there. Because he had stayed in Bengal, he somehow felt involved in it. He came there every evening, every performance. He gave some money, as far as I remember, for the famine relief. And after every performance, he, on his own, stood there at the gate with his chadar spread, asking people to contribute. And that is how we came to know each other. He was a nice person. He was a very important person for the theatre also.
And was it after this performance of Antima Vilasha in Bombay that P.C. Joshi of the CPI, he wanted you to be there and lead the theatre activity of the central squad?
Yes. When I wanted to come back to Calcutta, we had from Bombay we had gone to Ahmedabad. In Ahmedabad I had performed. After that I came back. I wanted to go back. I asked Binoy Roy was to take my role and I was coming away. P.C. Joshi asked me, whatever for? Why do you want to go back Calcutta? I am going to create a central squad here. Why don't you stay here? I said, no, nothing doing. And that Binoy will be all right for that. Not me. I have to go back because there is a wonderful play written by Bijan, Navanna, and that must be staged. And I go for that. So, well, he listened to me and then said, it's all right. I write a letter to Bhavani Sen. You take it. He will make the arrangements. First, he said he had all sorts of grandiose plans. He said that Dilip Bose has, most probably Dilip Bose, they have a house near the Chandannagar's railway station. He said, you take that house, you stay there with your artists, rehearse there. Whenever necessary, you come to the city, perform and go back there. Create a commune there. And you need somebody. You know, you're dealing with young boys and young girls, so it is necessary there should be some discipline. And why don't you take Manoranjan Bhattacharya? He's like your father. He will be there. And I never quite believed that that was possible. But it was a wonderful, exhilarating dream. Anyway, I came back with the letter and gave the letter to the provincial headquarters or whatever it was there. And felt quite amused because we people was always looked down upon by the party members. And they thought that we were confused. Yes, artists within quotes. And say that artist, one of those artists within quotes, he is coming with a letter from the General Secretary of the Communist Party to the Provincial Secretary. This was quite funny. Anyway, it happened and they said there was a meeting and then Bhavani Sen was there, Somnath Lahiri was there and I think Panchu Babu was also there. There were other persons. There was a big meeting and they said that yes, the money will be given. I think they didn't very much like the idea of having an artist group like this. Anyway, they said that we'll have the whole timers and the money will be given by the People's Relief Committee and all the sale proceeds will go back to the People's Relief Committee. I wasn't very happy because it was not because of relief only that we are starting a theatre. There is another much beyond that.
It's just not topical.
Yes. And anyway, I had talked about it to somebody. I don't remember whether it was Arun Mitra or Chinu. I don't remember.
Arun Mitra, the poet.
Yes. Or Chinu or somebody. I don't exactly remember. But he replied that, but where is the money coming from? Money must be somewhere, and People's Relief Committee has got the money. They can invest it, and this is the only way out. I said most probably that was the only way out, so I agreed. Anyway, it was done that way, and we did the play.
Navanno, you mean?
Navanno.
But Shambhala, allow me, before we pass on to Navanno, that milestone, would it be possible for you to just tell us a little about, you said at one point that the kind of acting, with exceptions of course, was not the kind that you encountered in the public theatre or professional theatre, was not your cup of tea. You wanted acting to be something different.
Yes.
And so you had already started acting outside that commercial theatre. Could you just demonstrate a bit what kind of changes took place?
There was more changes than this simple thing. More changes in this way that I had sort of thought about the sound pattern of the colloquial speech. And I thought that this can be said this way. But that was all about, what should I say, the clear literary Bengali. That sort of Bengali that we speak. But the change, when it came with a dialect. The plays that Bijon wrote were with dialects. And even if there were not dialects, the characters were a small petty clerk or a person like that. I couldn't bring it in my voice. I saw with all my efforts, training and everything, with all my sensibilities, etc., I have trained myself for another sort of theatre. But the theatre, when it really came, it was a different theatre. And I wasn't up to it. That was a very crucial point with me. But how to get involved in this theatre? For example, there was somebody who wasn't an actor at all. He was doing the role of, in Agun, he was doing the role of a petty clerk, say. He said, in the morning, he says, "Ore, ghotte de, taratari chanta korni." He could say it very quickly and very, very realistically. Whereas with my voice, I would have said, "Ore, ghotita de," which is not that way. And I could feel the difference. I felt that in my speaking the words, they were not really, they were colloquial. The sound pattern I know, but this sound pattern is different. And that sounded much more real, nearer the roots. So I had to again start my training, to train myself to be able to project that. And that is one of the reasons why I didn't do any role in Jawanbandi. Because I couldn't, I never
You
cared
thought you
about
couldn't give
it.
the best of yourself.
Yes, I never cared for the dialects. Then slowly going inside, I somehow felt that there were 2-3 inflections that I know of the. It's a koile hai ki নিজের মুচির আগুনে তামাক ধরালি হয় নাকি নিজের চিতের আগুনে তামাক ধরালি হয়. That sort of a sentence which was written somewhere, I think by Manoj Bosu, the writer, and that had appealed to me. And somehow I had mentally read it out in that dialect. The dialect I didn't know, but that particular line somehow I coined. In this, when I had to retrain myself, I went on, deeper into myself, dig inside me, and find out if there were some roots which can help me. I tried to think of all the persons that I have heard talking. For example, the washerman or the other in the bazaar, the baniya, And then I suddenly remembered that I have this inflection, I can do that. And that slowly brought me to the dialect that was being used. And from then on, I found that all the dialects, they have a particular sing-song way. Just as I tried to find out the sound pattern of colloquial, good Bengali, the same way I could find that the sound pattern of all the dialects, there are 4 important divisions, for example, of the East, of the North, of the West, and of the South. From the East, and for example, from Mymensingh, and from the South, 24 Parganas, it will be now there is a similarity between the two.
Basic structural similarity.
Yeah, structural similarities there. I slowly got to that. And that is how we could do Chhedatar.
And once you got that, it was now easy for you to do justice to both the sublime and the ridiculous, the mundane and the extraordinary, the out of the ordinary.
You may say that. That gave me a range. And I wanted everybody to be able to do that, so that he or she can do the dialects and at the same time speak the very cultured Bengali, because there are many words which have been coined in this language which expresses a lot. They cannot be expressed in the dialects. Those words are not there. You see, it's very important to know the words. And if you believe, I mean, it's a scientific fact that human beings became a different sort of animal when they started talking. That is, as you go on talking, your brain develops, your thought process is again refined and made sharper. That is one of the reasons why today, when I find most of the men, they put a lot of English words in their Bengali sentences, I feel that that is one way to go to hell. Because we are losing not only our language,
but losing our function of the brain too.
Yes, that is what I feel. Maybe I hope it is not correct. But if it is correct, it's going to spell disaster for us.
This perception of yours regarding the understanding of the language, its range, its diction, and all this helps us in understanding your later statements, where you always try to emphasize that speaking is not just the exercise of the voice box, but it's also to impregnate it with intelligence and all that.
Yes, of course. In language, when we speak it, it tries to communicate. But what does it try to communicate? It's not just one level.
Just not information.
Yes, it's just not information. For example, I want to write. I asked another person to say, give me that pen. In Bengali, let me say it in Bengali, I will say, hey, kolomta dao to kolomta. That way. But I may also say, kolomta dao, kolomta. That does not only express my desire to have the pen, but also my relationship with that other person. The difference of relationships between the two persons. How am I related? And all these social relationships are there.
Out of the voice it emerges.
Out of the voice, out of the, not exactly only voice, the whole attitude. Now, this is an important factor, but when we talk about this voice, we must remember that acting naturally is not only voice, but we are tackling that part of it just now. That how I learned to adapt myself to the dialects. And as I went through it, I understood that how these can be used. For example, when I read poems, it was very important to clearly etch out the images that were there in the poem. There are hard words, there are soft words, there are all sorts of, And when I read a poem, for example, I say that নিমের শাখার থেকে একাকীতমকে পাখি নামে উড়ে গেল কুয়াশায়, কুয়াশার থেকে দূর কুয়াশায় আরো. Now this brings out the picture of the kuasha. How to make it palpable. No, that was important. Now from this, when we come to the dialects, now the position is quite intriguing. You have to bring out the pictures again. You have to bring out the images again. You have to bring out the social relationships again. But in a slightly different scale of voice, I mean. And that gave me the idea that how we use different scales, each one of us. And not only that, these are much later developments, much later. But I came to know slowly, working in this way, that, we have different breathing patterns. We all do not breathe in the same rhythm. If you have ever seen a tiger or a leopard sleeping, you will see, even in sleep, how quickly it breathes. The stomach going up and down, breathing so quickly, which you wouldn't do even when you were awake. But that means that is his relaxation. So when he crouches and jumps to attack,
it increases manifold.
That is one sort of rhythm. In men also you will find somebody breathes very slowly. They're slightly idle, or people who take a little more time to react to things. You have that sort of people. And the others who are very quick-witted, always as if on the toes. The breathing pattern must be different. Now when you have different characters in a play, you not only block them, you use these different breathing patterns like different percussion instruments, and how you bring them together, so that what happens, that it is an orchestration. That becomes very interesting. For example, in a very important scene in Oedipus, for example, the messenger from Corinthus comes and says, "Acha, tomra ki keu bolte paro?" Now he keeps that rhythm. As against him, there were other very faster moving rhythms. Now this is very interesting. These things I learned much later. I became conscious about these things much later. But these were the beginnings.
Incipient.
These were the beginnings. That's how I first started learning, and went on finding out the deeper and deeper layers. I hope I am not being egotistical, but this is how it has happened.
To get back to the beginning of Navana, did the play strike you as something important as soon as you read it?
Yep. It was not fully finished at that time when I read it.
You got the feel of it?
Yes, we thought that it was a remarkable thing and it's going to be a great production. I had a feeling.
In the production itself, here again you had a batch of more or less uninitiated, untrained actors.
Yes.
And you did not have any model before you in terms of decor, in terms of choreography and other things, the lighting design and all that. How did you get about it, these various elements?
I don't know how it happened. It just happened. And there are many times in my life, I don't know how it happened. I have seen my own production, for example, Rakta Karabi or Charuda. After a long time, I was just stood there by the wings and saw it. And then it looked so intriguing. I was so surprised that, are these things created by me? I don't know how it happened, but it happened. And as it happened, there is a very strong logic behind it. In here also, Navanna, before Navanna, I have seen pictures of different productions, European productions. Forget about the realistic stage set, but the other type, which was quite common at that time, for example, a cutout of a tree, a cutout of a building, and the sun there in the background, setting sun, and there are some chairs in the foreground where the actors are. Somehow I didn't like it.
I mean, these non-realistic things even.
Yes, even the non-realistic things which were being done, which was quite in vogue. I thought that these two-dimensional house does not go along with this three-dimensional human being's figure. It has somehow to be in rhythm to this human beings, the actors who are more important. And that way, Adolf Appia, the way he used steps and staircases, I thought that was much better. But in a play like Navanna, you couldn't have steps like Appia had. So how to go about it? There were various points. I felt that in this play, it is very necessary to show this panoramic view of these people against a background of utter darkness. And I somehow like this background of darkness very much. They lighted up, the journey of these people against this black background. But that means a very costly velvet curtain which can absorb all the light. That only can give you the idea.
And offset the character.
Yes. We didn't have the money. I went to Maharshi and said, I wanted this, but we can't buy those curtains. I wouldn't know where to buy them from. Maharshi said, but use jute cloth. I said, jute cloth? I wasn't very convinced. He said, yes, why not? We are a poor people. We don't have velvets. We will have jute curtains. Have jute curtains. I pondered. Then I thought, Acha, let me go in for the jute cloths. Let's see. So we arranged with a decorator, Muhammad. It is just at the juncture of Free School Street and Shuran Banerjee Street. There is one decorator's shop there. They were the persons I approached and told them that we want these things for hire for so many performances, etc., etc. Now everybody knows that we had used jute cloth, but nobody knows how we used them. That is the funniest part of it. Anyway, because people didn't expect it to be history at that time, so they didn't pay that much of attention. Anyway, when the new jute cloth were there, shining, I had a feeling. It was so shining and so reflecting the light, looking golden. I thought that will also give the same idea. It was absolutely very smiling morning, so to say. And against that background,
the story of this journey.
Story of this devastation.
It was just the other way around, but
Yes.
eventually boiling down to the same.
Yeah, I felt that it will
Experience.
bring out the meaning.
And it did.
I hope so. And that was the first time when he used different levels in the first scene only, but different levels. How the society is reacting to the British oppression and how this individual family, they are known people, they are reacting to it in the foreground. That way it was something very innovative. A very
And the
new thing.
society, general social background was put on the upper level, upstage.
Upstage.
And the individuals with
Yeah,
their stories
They were in the
downstage.
foreground, downstage. That was very interesting, and that was not seen. I remember, if I'm not very mistaken, you can ask Gopal Haldar Mushaifer about this. I remember that on the very first performance, he was there in the auditorium seeing it. He was one of the actors, but he comes late in the second act. So the first scene, he was in the auditorium. After the first scene, he came in. When we met there, he said, if I were the police, I wouldn't have allowed it. After seeing the first scene. This was because we had to get round the police. The script that we had given, and the thing that we had done, different in, what should I say, it expressed, but the things were written there. And
they did not have the...
They couldn't imagine, yes, the outcome will be like
of
this, the potential of those descriptions. But it came out. And naturally, it became very famous.
How did you tackle the lighting design and the...
There was not much of a lighting design at that time. We didn't have any spots at that time. No bulb spots. No resistance dimmers. We had only two carbon arcs, one on the perch and one on the opposite perch, and two water dimmers for them. And rest of it was floodlight and the footlights and the top batten. But that was all. And with that we had to do. There was no other way.
May I just interrupt? In a personal discussion long back, you had told me, in a country like ours, where we don't have lots of well-equipped theatre houses sprawled over the country, so you have to be ready to perform at any place. And therefore, in such a context of our poor country, you should rely more on the lights than on the sets. This is the richness, the vastness of sets which you can possibly use only in one or two stages, which you cannot use everywhere. So try to minimize that part of reality on stage and try to compensate for that with the use of light.
Maybe I have said that. There is more reasons to it, I think. With lights, you bring the mood. The set does not give you different moods, but light does. Number one. Number two is the lights bring out the human characters in front, which is again more important. That was the main reasons. And then again, it all depends on the time and your society. That particular moment, people did not know about the bulb spots or the resistance dimmers or the other dimmers that were there. Whatever they had seen, with that parameter, they saw this one and thought it was very new, because the lights were used in a slightly different way. The whole thing was done to bring out the starkness of the tragedy.
So in handling Nabanno, how did you tackle your acting company?
Actually, I fixed up the positions, blockings, etc. I edited the play. It's not as it was written. It was done like this. The first act, when they are in the village, it is on the stage. In the second act, when they are in the city, then we use the revolving board from one scene to another. Just showing the kaleidoscopic view of all the things that are happening to them. Then again in the last act, we don't have the revolving board. This is how it has been made. And there were blockings, etc., things which we wanted to be pronounced, which should come out where the lights will fall, that sort of thing. But the main training, as far as the year was concerned, the dialect was concerned, was done by Bijan. Bijan used to take those rehearsals, to make them speak, because there were many persons who had come from Barishal or from Dhaka, and they had that sort of twang. They couldn't very easily speak the 24 Parganas language, and that sort of thing was there. And Bijan did that part of it, and the other things were done by me. Anyway, that was how it was done.
When you were tackling a company of uninitiated, untrained actors, did you at that very same time feel that it would have been wonderful to have an ensemble of trained actors with kind of...
No. I didn't know of any such actors at that time, so naturally I didn't have any model in my mind.
To quote you, their behavior could have been good enough.
Yes, their behavior was good enough for those roles, and their gauntness and all the other things. Only I had to see that the climactic points, the important points in the play should be brought out. And even though I was not very at home with that particular dialect at that time, even, but I had just started, I was doing a role there. Even then, I could sort of point that out, that this is the place, and where I want this word to be important, and this is the meaning, the import behind that particular sentence or the particular word. That way it was done. And we did it. And there are some very good points which Bijan can also express. Bijan was wonderful in that character, really wonderful in that character. Particularly in one scene when the doctor says that you don't have any pain anywhere, you are all right, it's all dream. Bhuli jao tomar byatar kotha bhuli jao. And now Bijan turns and goes out of the stage saying, muttering, bhule jao, tumi tomar byatar kotha bhuli jao. That was remarkable. That was something to be seen, to understand.
It became so evocative.
Yes, and all the tragedy,
as if the trauma of the whole
tragic
situation.
depth of, you may almost say, the tragic depth of King Lear coming out through this old patriarch. Remarkably done. That was very good. And all those things taken together, it made a very memorable production. And that was the turning point, as people say, of the Bengali theatre.
So to say, the beginning of the modern theatre.
It depends on the meaning that you put in the word modern.
Sombhu, what I wanted to know also, apart from your exposure to Jatra, what at that point of time in 1944, say, what was your degree of your exposure to Indian literature, sculpture, painting, music, and all these things?
This is very difficult to say. I haven't kept any, what do you call it?
Diary.
Yeah, diary, or a list of things that I have seen. It was there in the air.
So after this you left IPTA, after some time?
Yes.
That was
after Dharti Ke Lal.
That was in 1945?
Actually, it was in the beginning of 1944. 45 we had gone to do Dharti Ke Lal. 46...
Dharti Ke Lal, that film?
Yes. IPTA film. And then we came back in 46. And Gandhiji was killed.
That was in 48?
That was in 48. Yes. 7 days after Gandhiji got killed.
That is early February. He was assassinated on 30th January.
Yes. Just 7 days after, on the same, day of the week, there was a meeting, and that was the time when I said that I leave IPTA, won't work anymore. And there are naturally reasons. Something happened there, which I don't need to go in just now. Anyway, that was the day when I left it. And in 48, sometime in the late 40s, 48, Maharshi said that why should we eat our hearts out? We have no quarrel with anybody. We want to do good theatre. So why don't we start? Let us work. So that is how we started. We didn't have the name Bahurupi at that time, but we started just a group. And somehow the play Pathik from Tulsi Babu came to us, and the remarkable character of Rashu Dhar came in, which was done also again remarkably by Maharshi. It started that way.
So from 48 to 50.
Yes, with Pathik, Ulukhagda and Chedatar.
This was the period when you produced these three plays and Bahurupi was already formed and it became important. But here was the problem of organization which had no model before it.
Yes.
So you had to, at the one time you had 3 or 4 good actors with you, but you had to build a host of actors for your future productions and also for these productions.
Yes.
And you had to create a new theatre movement totally, which was just out of the scratch as we agreed. And how to tackle this arduous job with no pioneers to follow.
The time helps you. Just as I didn't know anything about directing a play, the same way I didn't know anything about the organization. But when we started it, I remember a friend, you must have heard his name, he was a very nice person, Sharna Kamal Bhattacharya, writer. He had told me that Sombhu Babu, in Bengali he said that O karur upor obhiman korben na. And obhiman has naturally a very different meaning in Hindi, but the Bengali obhiman is different. He said, don't depend on others, don't have any obhiman. If you want to do something, if anybody wants to do something, he has to do all the things himself, right from Juto Shelai to Chondipart. And that I felt was the challenge. We have to do it. And I tried to do it.
If we still continue a little, I mean, here was a group of persons who did not have any economic bondage. I mean, they were not getting money out of it. And chances of getting fame was...
Yes.
That was not known to any of them.
Yes.
And these people had come together.
Yes.
With you as the leader. And how to bind them, keep them in shape. This has so many possible pitfalls.
But this always happens. You look into the history of any organization, it is always like that. There is a catalytic point. Somebody plays that. Trust they had in me because of so many things. Number one is, Maharshi had a great trust in me. That was something very big. And then they also have seen me work. And somehow they felt that this was a man who can be trusted. And you know, when one is young, one has that idealism. One can go a lot, not in lieu of money only, not in lieu of fame, but only for fulfilling oneself. And that was one important point which I went on asserting throughout, that it must be a part of our life. It is for our fulfillment that we come to the theatre.
Well, Shomda, we have noticed very keenly and admiringly that you have, in the selection of your plays, you have always gone from, say, one genre to another genre. And sometimes this changeover is almost diametrically opposite, apparently. But we have also noticed at the same time that each play created a tremendous star in the theatre public, and which leads us to believe, this fact leads us to believe, that this was possibly the need of the time, thematically, formally, technically. So, in the context of this retrospective perception of ours as your admirer, we would like to know, how did you really change over from genre to genre, almost diametrical opposite, from 51, Tagore's 4 chapters, Charodhai, Then in 52, Ibsen's Enemy of the People. Then in 54, that milestone of Indian theatre, Rakto Korbi, Red Oleander. And again you did certain other Tagore plays, Putul Khela, again in a doll's house of Ibsen. And at one point of time you started working on, in 62 you suddenly thought that 52 production was possibly not good enough. Even if it was good enough at that time, you needed to reapproach, maybe with a total new look. Then at one point of suddenly...
Yes, I think that the 62 production of Dashachakra, The Enemy of the People, is much better than what it was in 52.
And then at one point of time in the 60s, you suddenly went for Badal Sarkar's Baki Itihas. Then later, you made Badal Sarkar direct a play of his own under the banner of Bahurupi.
Yes.
And then again his Pagla Ghoda. And not only from Bengal, but you went to Maharashtra and brought Vijay Tendulkar's Shantata Court Chalu Hai, Silence, the Court is On. And while Badal Sarkar was not so famous as he is today,
No, he wasn't.
he wasn't. And Vijay was not also that famous as he is today. But they were somewhat known in the theatrical circle.
In their own regions.
In their own region especially. But you went for also people like Nitish Sen, whose Borbor Banshi you did, who was practically unknown even to us Calcutta theatre workers. And so how did you go about these changes from play to play? At the same time continue your search for a theatre which would be Indian in its spirit, in its appeal, and which would communicate, which would get Indian people en rapport. This is something which we have seen the result, but not the process.
I will try to explain it as best as I can. The thing was, I learnt a lot from Navanna. When Navanna was done, we really created some very deep and subtle points in that production. And people, to use it very broadly, the people lapped it up. Everybody liked it. So that brought me to an understanding that when there is a big thing, big event in the social life, the whole society sort of gets a center. And the artist who can stand at that center and speak to his people, he will get a hearing all round. But when the society hasn't got that center, it is eccentric and divided, then it is very difficult for the artist to be able to speak from the center. But where is the center, That is something which I learned. And so it was important to find out the center even in an eccentric society, so-called eccentric society, because all the time there is a sort of cohesiveness in the whole society. But I will not go into that elaborately.
But we get the point.
The point is the human being, which I always think is at the center of theatre. And to express the human being in its multidimensional form. For that, these things are very necessary. So that's how it started.
In Navanna.
In Navanna, and then we did it in the later production, subsequent plays in Bahurupi.
But to take cue from your own writings, we had the misfortune of being born close to the British rule, which has also created certain contradictions in us, as a result of which we have always sometimes found ourselves whether to go straight, try to straight go to the roots and try to see it as it is, and at the same time this fashion, this imposition of the British culture to its colony. And so caught in between these two, we were really upset, and we missed, possibly many of us, the volcano underneath this surface tranquility, which is a different kind of tension that Raja presents.
Yes.
Well, sorry, Shambhuda, for the digression that I made, referring to the revivalism that some of us are suffering from in present Indian theatre, and on the other extreme, to go for the latest Western thing, in the in thing. Sorry for the digression. May I come back to the coincidence of Raja and Raja Oedipus in terms of acting? When we saw King Oedipus, his queen and other characters, for not a moment we felt that they were Bengalis, but at the same time they were not Greek aliens to us. The essential human beings with their crisis came across to us through your performance. In Raja we found here were Indians, and almost out of time and in time, these Indians we saw.
Yeah.
And how did you manage to, we saw it was managed. I mean, with your bodies, you acted as Greeks, you acted as Indians, and they were just not because of Aharya, that kind of, because of the costumes and the decor, but the persons, the actors themselves, were becoming Greek and universal. And these were Indians and also somewhere universal in my own mind, to my own mind. In one way, you used your body, the interrelationship of the actors, the movement.
You know, every art medium has got its own way of expressing things which cannot be done by any other medium. For example, after Sa, if you have Kamal Ray, it creates certain feelings, and that cannot be expressed by any other media. You cannot express it by painting, you cannot express by writing, it expresses itself. Now, if theatre acting, I mean, theatre itself is an art. If acting is any art, then there must be something which cannot be expressed by any other medium. In this theatre, what happens, for example, I say that we were sitting in a room, a man came and stood at the door, and the man was quite dark. He has got round yellow eyes, eyebrows like the moustaches, and that sort of thing. Now here, when I write these things or I narrate them to you, one comes after the other. But in the theatre, when they come, it's all simultaneously there. His darkness, his yellow eyes, his heavy eyebrows, they are all there at the same time for you to see it and understand it. If you were an intelligent person, if you were a sort of that very receptive person, you will see it. If you were not, you will not. Now, this simultaneity brings in different dimensions also. For example, the moment you see a person in actual life, for example, when you go, for example, you sit in a bus and you look at the passenger by your side. Unknowingly, you try to assess him. Then what section of the society he comes from? No, what is the sort of economic background? Or what is his literary background, educational background? All these things, whether this man is a mean sort of man or a very, a gentleman. Now these things do happen automatically. It should happen in the theatre also, with all your sensibilities being there, what should I say, being kept very, prokhor is the word in Bengali word which I would very much like to use here. And all your sensibilities roused.
Receptive.
And at that point, tautly, all these strings are tautly
Will play the right note.
so that to get the right wavelength, vibrations.
Essentially, it was great acting. It was exposition of the mind, exposition of individual with relation to the other individuals and the society they belong to.
All these things taken together is important in theatre. And that is why theatre is so what should I say, so important to me. It has got a hypnotic value because it acts at the same time on different levels. It rouses you on different levels. And to me, as I see it, because actor is very important to me, because I feel that the human being is at the core of a theatre, every character is a story by himself. Each and every character, he has got a background, he has got a history, he has got his own problems, he has got his own worries. All these come out in each of the characters. And now all these different characters with different backgrounds and different philosophies, they come together in a play. And then sometimes they confront each other, sometimes they don't, but all this together makes a play.